This is Daftaboutcraft, the craft beer podcast. Daftaboutcraft, you're tuned into your favorite beer podcast.
Well, you can't fail to notice that it is dry January, and wherever you look, whatever you listen to, people are talking about abstaining from alcohol, not drinking for the month of January. So we thought, well, we need to touch on this subject, being a craft beer podcast, and the fact that there's loads of craft breweries out there now doing no and low alcohol beer. And we thought, who can we speak to who's an authority on this? Because we're not. So the Sober Boozer Club was the place we went to, and we found Ben Gibbs. Welcome to the podcast, Ben.
How are we?
We're well. It's a pleasure to have you join us. I've been following you for ages, following your exploits, and you've got a really fascinating story to tell.
Yeah, this is my first beer podcast. Every podcast I've been on before this has been, sobriety. So to be on a beer podcast, I think it does speak volumes for where the world of alcohol-free beer is kind of heading.
That's a really good point, yeah.
So yeah, I'm really excited to be here. My story, in short, was I was an alcoholic, still am an alcoholic. I gave up booze 3 years ago now. But the thing I was scared about when I stopped drinking alcohol was losing beer. Because beer, I mean, as you know, it becomes a part of your identity, doesn't it? And the thought of not being able to enjoy that was really terrifying. So I threw myself into the world of no and low alcohol. This would have been just after COVID, really, or maybe 12 months after COVID. So it was still an emerging world, really. Mash Gang were kind of early doors. They had released a few beers, and there weren't many exclusive alcohol-free breweries about. So what I could find, I enjoyed, and that just started me spiraling, and now we are 3 years in, and I'm pushing 1,000 different beers from all over the world that I've tried.
And the whole no and low alcohol scene absolutely exploded after COVID. From then until now, everybody is doing no and low alcohol beers.
Yeah, like the growth of it since I started has been crazy. The amount that you can get when you go to bottle shops now.
Yeah.
And even supermarkets, you can get decent alcohol-free beer in supermarkets now. It's not just Beck's Blue, Heineken, etc., which I think are appalling. I'm very passionate about Heineken Zero. I think it's a very dangerous drink, and not just because it's pretty foul, in my opinion. For a lot of people, their first impression of alcohol-free beer is a Heineken Zero.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And it's not great, is it, really?
No, it's very sort of artificial, sweet, sugary, doesn't really taste like
artificial
beer.
Sweetness, yes. All of them. I need to calm down. But for some people, like myself, if I'd have tried that and not persisted, and thought, oh, no, this alcohol-free stuff isn't for me, I wouldn't have been able to carry on my sober journey without alcohol-free beer. So there are some people that will drink this, will be put off it forever, and it could be really quite dangerous. That's a small number of people, but it's still enough for them to have to do better, I think.
What do you make of 0% Guinness?
That is probably the most important drink, this sphere. I think for us to start conquering alcohol-free beer on tap, I think we have to start with Guinness, because everybody you talk to who likes a beer will say, I'm unsure of it, but I'll tell you what's really good, alcohol-free Guinness, every time. And I think it is good, like very, very good. It's a little bit sweet for me, just a little bit. It's really important because everyone trusts Guinness, and everyone does seem to find it quite palatable, which is a good thing.
That's interesting. I had more or less exactly that conversation with my sort of father-in-law on Christmas Day. He likes Guinness, and he had Guinness and Guinness Zero, and he sort of was doing this. He said, zebra drinking, as he referred to it. He said, I don't mind doing that now with this one. I quite like it. And I hadn't had it, so I did actually have it for the first time on Christmas Day in Cannes. I think, as you summed it up, perfectly pleasant. I could tell it wasn't Guinness, but it wasn't so far removed that it was a completely different beer.
Once you lose the connotation of it being a Guinness, you can enjoy it for what it is. I think when you are comparing full alc to no alc, and you're lucky enough to be able to drink both, it's very easy to go, oh no, it misses this, because of course it does. Ethanol is pretty good stuff, man. Like that's why I got so into it.
You're okay talking about your alcoholic days. That's not a problem for you.
Yeah, of course. The whole thing is my alcoholism. Like, I was a horrible person for a while. It didn't last very long. For a couple of years, maybe, I was just the worst person in the world. And I don't know what brought that on. I don't know why that became a thing, but sure enough, it did. But you've got to hold yourself accountable for that. I've forgiven myself for it, and I'm past it now, and I'm really happy to say I'm not the person that I was becoming anymore. If I'm going to be embarrassed about it, then that just adds stigma to alcoholism, because alcoholics don't all look the same. You know, we don't all drink out of brown paper bags, and I didn't wake up and need a drink every morning. It was just if I had really lovely, like, dipper, after a couple of them, I wanted 12 cans of Red Stripe. That was my alcoholism.
Was it craft beers you were drinking, or was it anything? What got you into that situation in the first place?
I really enjoyed Heineken, ironically. And I kind of started to dip my toe into craft beers during lockdown, really. Started exploring the world of craft beer. I think I was drinking these beers at the same volume as what I could drink a lager. And they were just hitting me different. And at the same time, I was miserable. I tried to kill myself twice. Historically, there was a lot of unaddressed issues that I had. The alcohol, when the percentage was lifted, became just a lubricant for me then acting out and not really knowing how to deal with those emotions. But my kind of drinking was always lagers. I didn't know anything about beer, really, until I stopped drinking alcohol.
That's right. Yeah, okay. Where we sort of talked where the scene has got to now with the low alcohol stuff. I wonder, do you notice how big a difference now, or do you just notice generally the quality of it all is better?
So I think I can remember my first Sierra Nevada and being like, wow, that's amazing. But they didn't do it in Booze Village, where I live. And like Jaipur was just like delicious. Actually just released a Jaipur alcohol free, which is, it's not quite the same, but it's a really good beer in its own right. So I do remember, these really, I always compare it to, like, if I'll drink a particularly hoppy, juicy beer, I feel like I'm in a smoking area at 4 a.m. That's how I feel right now. And it's like, yeah, that's okay. We're getting there. These real big craft flavors, because I can remember it. I didn't really know what I was looking for when I was a drinker back then. I just knew what I liked. Like, I liked a Blue Moon. Like I say, I loved Sierra Nevada, Jaipur, and I just loved a good volume lager. So I didn't start learning about beer and about my palate until alcohol-free beer, which I suppose is quite unique in some senses.
So you sort of got dragged into beer and alcoholism pretty quickly then, by the sounds of it.
My entire journey into it was I was married very young, 10-year relationship, came to an end, and it was not what I wanted to happen. So I was drinking to deal with that then, because it made me feel good. And before then, I didn't really drink at all. I'd have like a couple of bottles of Budweiser when I was like 18, 19. I wasn't a fan of alcohol. And then I started enjoying my life more. I'd kind of dealt with a divorce and feeling like, okay, this is good. This alcohol is great. I can be social again. But I was working late shifts as well. I'd be drinking to kind of get to sleep after a shift. And it started to become you've got this problem. This will help. Alcohol will help. It helps with everything. I think over a course of maybe 5 years, it was creeping. And then it really accelerated during COVID. Right. Drink every day. Then the world opens up again. Drink like you do at home in lockdown. But all of a sudden there's people around and you're really angry with how your life's turned out. So that's when I'd start to be, nasty to some of my friends and things. So it was a slow burn. And then it was a bang. It's got me.
So then recognizing it and getting off the booze, how was that?
It was really strange, and I don't want to sound dismissive when I say this, but there was one evening where my entire social group were there, and I kicked off about something ridiculous, as per. Everyone was in the same room at the same time, and everyone saw it all at once, and it was like the penny had dropped with them. I've got little bits of memory of the evening, but I remember being aware that this was going on and thinking, no, I'm going to double down here. I'm going harder and harder and harder at them all. And that's kind of the next morning I knew, if you don't stop right now, in 5-10 years, you will have nothing. And I just didn't drink again. It was as easy as that.
That was it. You just put a line under it and that was done.
Yeah. Like,
wow.
Don't get me wrong. I'd lied to people about trying to cut down.
Right.
Like, I went to Alcoholics Anonymous so that people could see me going there, but I had no intention of stopping because I thought that I could moderate. I'll go there and I'll listen to these alcoholics and I'll talk about how I'm struggling with alcohol at the moment, and then I'll be able to drink like a normal person. It's a disease. Like, if you've got it, you've got it, and you can't drink like a normal person. it's really hard to get to that point of knowing it. But once that kind of penny dropped, it was like, right, nope, never again. And I haven't touched a drop since.
Wow, that's quite incredible.
Yeah, I don't know who to credit for it. You know, it's not, it didn't feel like it was like a lot of hard work put in to do it, if that makes sense.
I think probably that's your personality as well. You know, you get some people who give up cigarettes and they just wake up one morning and decide, that's it, not having any more. And they don't have any more. But those people are few and far between, I think.
Yeah, see, I never put myself in that bracket. Cigarettes, I mean, I've stopped smoking cigarettes, but I'm still on the old vapes. And I know I need to stop doing that. Nah, I can't. I was just so tired. I was so tired. And I was sick of hurting other people. I didn't really care what happened to me. I was just so sick of seeing the people that were close to me disappointed. And I think that was the main driving factor in it, really.
Before we go any further, I've got to say, you know, massive thumbs up for your honesty and saying it how it is.
That's my whole thing. When I realised I was an alcoholic, you know, I was 29. And I didn't know anyone that looked like me and talked like me and had the same interests of me that I could relate to and be like, oh, they're an alcoholic as well. That's kind of the main thing. That's why I set up the page initially. It was like, if there's anyone else that is thinking they're on their own, like, you're not. But yeah, thank you.
Your Instagram page, you've got a lot of traction on there. A lot of people follow you. You do a lot of stuff on there. You post every day. You post stories. As our listeners have just heard, you're very honest and you like that on your page.
Yeah, it's mad. Because really, all I'm doing is stood in my living room, like where we are now, holding a can of beer and saying, "Oh, this exists. You want to drink it? Like, I'm going to drink it. You can drink it as well if you want.
But
what's in it? I don't know. Hops. Yeah, cool."
It's really caught people's imaginations, so hasn't it? Because I know you've been on local radio several times talking about it. People are really interested.
Yeah, well, I think there's two things. I think a lot of people are shocked maybe to hear someone say, like, when people say, like, "Oh, why don't you drink then?" What you turn around and say, "Well, it's because I'm an alcoholic." Oh, and you're okay to admit that. And I think that is quite endearing maybe for some people. But also it's just that, and this isn't in a patronising way at all, but it's about education, isn't it? If you don't know something exists, I'll show you that these things exist, because they do exist, these beers. And if you're interested, there's this whole world of beer here that is so readily available now. I think I was very lucky in terms of people connecting to my page, which, again, it blows my mind that people are interested enough to interact with me. But I think I decided to stop drinking at a very good time for the industry.
Yeah. Do you think that a lot of breweries saw you talking about your experiences and it pushed them to making no alcohol beer? The scene has exploded, and I wonder if it's anything to do with you.
There is one theory that I have. I'm not going to allow myself to dwell on it, but Daya have just put a beer out exclusively on tap, and it's called Spoken Into Existence. And I'm like, right, I nagged them for a long time, and they ghosted me. Like, didn't reply to me, to the point where I was almost gonna start being a little bit naughty to them and like just being like, hey, like message every day sort of thing. Because I think from what I'd heard, they weren't interested in ever doing one. I don't know how true that is, but when someone said that to me, it was like moth to a flame, you know. And I was like, maybe we can play with this. But I saw the beer name Spoken Into Existence. And just for a second, I allowed myself to think, you know, I'm not saying it was me. You know, there are people, like, I've got to give a shout out to Martin Dixon, Alcohol Free World. He is the oracle of alcohol-free beer. And, you know, without his page, I wouldn't have created my own page because I came across him. And, you know, there's all this community now of people that will talk about this stuff. And we are quite a pushy bunch.
It's a good job you are, isn't it?
Well, I was going to say, you probably have to be as well, though, don't you? To a point, come with the territory a bit, because I suppose without sounding too horrible in a way, and I don't mean it this way, but you are an inconvenient truth in a sense, aren't you? You are a byproduct of this product. And, you know.
Oh, yeah. Like, we're the people saying, hey, you know this really nice beer that you make? We want you to waste a load of money, a load of time, a load of effort on failed brews, on a load of research and development, on loads of collabs with people where you're not going to make any money, just so that I can have a can to myself and go, look, I've done one.
So
that's basically what we're asking.
Will you go and sit in a pub now Are you happy sitting in a pub or a tap room?
Yeah. From day one, I couldn't wait to get back to the pub. As soon as my friends started talking to me again, the first place I wanted to go to was my local.
And when you went to your local with your friends, are they thinking, oh God, what's going to happen here?
They might have done the first time around. I've got a couple of very tight friends who, not for a second did they kind of think, they did think about, cutting ties, but they were with me throughout it all. All of the other people that have come back into my life since, it took maybe 6 months. And that was through myself and through them both being like, right, let's just all recover here for a bit. And then by the time they saw me, it was 6 months down the line, and I didn't see the change in myself. But for them, it was like, I think they were expecting me to be this disheveled, poor man, but like, what's happened to you? Like, put on weight, you're glowing, your skin, every cliche that you can think. Like, my teeth were sparkling, all of this, like, nonsense. So I think actually seeing me, it was quite endearing, really.
So we've all got a drink. We're all alcohol-free tonight. I have got a beer from Below Brew Co., all hopped up IPA.
Nice. But I haven't tried that one yet. That's their
really?
latest. I've got it in my fridge. The worst part of what I do, I've got about 15 beers because it's January. And of course, everyone's released a beer this month. So not only am I skint, I've got like a filming list.
Right.
The Below Brew Co., they're alcohol-free royalty.
Yeah.
Really good whole range of beers.
So do you find yourself now collecting beers? If there's a new alcohol-free beer out, you've got to get it, you've got to have it, you've got to try it.
I've got to get it because I want to film it so that people can see it. And I'm not saying that it's like, oh, no one will buy this if I don't do a video for it. But that's my thing. It's like Below Brew Co. released a beer for the one that you've got. As soon as I saw that, I thought, I haven't been able to talk about Below Brew Co. for months because their core range is so good. They don't release beers very often.
Right.
So it's more exciting that I can put a video out to say, look, this beer exists. It's become a bit of an obsession. I'm still drinking like an addict, basically.
We like to have a beer once and then we move on to the next one because we want to try that one and talk about that one. And it, in a sense, that is an addiction. And it's always a thing of, there's never enough beers out there that we can not have or not talk about. And it sounds like that's still, as you say, your buying behaviour and everything and how you treat the alcohol-free is kind of an addiction again. It's in a positive way.
Some would call it habitual, some would call it a ritual, but I am an addict. I got addicted to Trebor extra strong mints when I was 14. Like, I'd get through a pack of them every day, and my stomach was a mess, but I did it anyway because that's the kind of guy I am. So if I get into something, it becomes my personality.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of links between like neurodiversity and autism, Asperger's and addiction. I'm not going to go into that because I'm not diagnosed, but I really like trains. So you know what I'm saying?
Me too. Me too.
So I think people that are just a little bit quirky and a little bit cool and a little bit weird get really into things. And, alcohol-free beer, it's like, I'm in this gang, and it's... So, yeah, I drink like an addict, in short.
But it's a safe space, so you can.
Yeah, for sure. And just a really exciting space as well.
And from the outside looking in, you've made some really great contacts with breweries and brewers. You seem to have a great relationship with quite a few breweries.
Yeah, I've been really lucky. Attic in Birmingham, I did some stuff with those guys last January. I've done a bit with Unbarred. The guys at Mash Gang they're like brothers now. We're really, really tight. And Sam at We Can Be Friends. And it was just so many people that are my friends, now. And talking about other beer commentators like Martin Dixon in terms of the alcohol-free world. Really lucky to have a really good connection with Mark Dredge as well and people like this. And it's been so welcoming, and you don't think as an outsider going in, you think of like craft beer as being like the cool kids, like when you think back to craft beer bars, when you were just getting into drinking, you wouldn't dream of just going up and being like, oh, who's the brewer here? I mean, some people would, but I wouldn't.
Yeah.
So it was a real shock.
Have you opened your beer, Dave, by the way?
I've drunk it. It's all gone.
Oh, okay.
Oh, gosh. How was it?
It was good. It's very good, yeah.
Yeah.
If somebody said to me, what strength do you think that is? I don't think I'd say it's alcohol-free.
It's something I've been thinking about lately is early doors alcohol-free beer was terrible, and you still can get some terrible alcohol-free beer. Like, I'll never shy away from that. Some of it is rotten, and even some from established craft breweries is bad, you know. But I am kind of curious as to what place is there now for a table beer. This is something I've been thinking about lately. What's the point of a 3% beer now? If a 0.5 can be as good.
I had a 1.5 beer just the other day, which I thought was, I've never seen one before. I thought, got to try this. It was very good, but it does beg the question at that lower end of the scale, 1.5, 2, 2.5, 3. What is the point?
Because people are drinking a 3%, a 2%, whatever. They're drinking that knowing that it's low ABV. So if you can have one that's, 0.5 and is scientifically cannot intoxicate you in any way, I don't want to say what's the point, but it's just something I've been thinking about only for the past couple of weeks, really. It was like, hang on, what's the point of this? It's
a really fascinating question. I wish we both had a beer that was 3.4, I think, when we were doing an interview. And I wish I'd have now had that beer. And I also had the beer I'm drinking, which I haven't mentioned so far, which is Beak Flowers. Have you had that?
Oh, yeah. That's a We Can Be Friends collab. It's very, very good.
It is good.
Very juicy.
Yes. Yeah, that's fair. What I wish is now that I had both of those and I was having them blind for that question as to whether I could pick it. Because I think in my head I could, but the proof would only be if I could do it. So it's really interesting because I love table beers. I really do enjoy them, but you make a very valid point that if the gap has closed all the way up between 3% and 0.5, then why do you need to have them? Is it just because you can say, oh, well, I'm having a low ABV beer, that's fine? Or is it a mental thing that you can't quite bring yourself to go the whole hog and say I'm having something alcohol-free?
The quality has to be there. Like, I'm not calling for anyone to replace a table beer with a Beck's Blue. Like, that would be outrageous. But if the quality's there, unless you're sessioning a 3% for 12 hours and you still do want to get a little bit boozed at the end of it, that's fair. I'm very jealous, but that's fair. But if you're drinking because you're like a designated driver, is that just your, like, I love beer, but I love alcohol, but I love beer, but I love alcohol. And this isn't to call anyone like an addict at all, but it's kind of the perceived positiveness of having ABV in a drink.
I guess it depends what people's motivation is for having that drink in the first place. Personally, I'm not having a beer because I want to get drunk. I'm having a beer because I want to be a part of something and have a nice time, and I want to have a nice drink. Fundamentally, they're getting intoxicated, but is like a unfortunate byproduct for me.
A very fortunate byproduct for me historically, and then very unfortunate. This is like the main thing, isn't it? It's having something in your hand that makes you go, right, I'm an adult here, I'm drinking a beer. I can choose to tell you this is alcohol-free, or you can just think it's a beer. For me, holding a pint of Coke, or when your pourer gives you an alcohol-free beer in a Coke glass, which is just sacrilege, that happens very often. I may as well be holding a balloon that says alcoholic on it in the middle of a bar, And as open as I am, I don't want just anyone to know my whole story.
Yeah.
I don't know these people.
So what are you drinking then, Ben?
This is a Mash Gang beer. It's called Forever Grace, and it's a single hop Simcoe. They were doing sub boxes, and recently they got acquired by another company, which was really positive for the industry. I think it's a real statement in terms of where it's going, and really exciting for the guys there. But it's kind of, they've looked at everything, and doing the sub boxes, it's just not feasible, because every month there was like 3 limited brews that were only in the sub boxes. So to keep producing that every month is like just not feasible for them. So this is the last ever, for now at least, limited single hop Mash Gang beer. So yeah, I've been saving this. But then I realised I had to have a Mash Gang beer in my hand if I was coming on here to talk about alcohol-free beer, because like it's Mash Gang.
I have now also got a Mash Gang in my hand, and this is called Lesser...
I see what that is.
Lesser Evil. Mm-hmm. Is this good? Have you had this?
I don't feel like I can really comment, right? It's amazing. Okay.
It smells
incredible.
amazing.
The complexity of it and everything about it is amazing, but it's a sweet stout.
It smells sweet, yeah.
I did a podcast with Jordan, Mash Gang, not too long ago, and I was like, I'm not a fan of Rain in Blood, which was another stout that they did. And he was like, you don't like sweet, do you? I was like, I don't like sweet stouts. I've always hated, like, plum porters make me feel ill.
Right.
It's just not my palate. But I had no problem in saying, this is an incredible beer.
Yeah.
Because what they've achieved with it is just be interested to see what you make of it, actually.
It is a sweet stout, I can tell you that. It's got a lot of body to it.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
if you, like, when you get towards the end, you can leave that glass a half hour and that head, at least mine was, stuck around.
It is too sweet for me. I'm in the same boat as you there. That might be a tough ask trying to get through all of that, but it's a very cleverly made beer.
That's it, isn't it? It's a cult classic, that beer.
So have you had pretty much every Mash Gang beer ever produced?
Pretty much. In fact, I've got something that I can show you. I'm very proud of this. So, I haven't had every Mash Gang beer ever produced because, so they started during lockdown and I was still drinking full booze during lockdown. But since I got sober, I'm pretty sure I've had every single beer that they've put out. There's a couple of US exports at the moment, or imports because we're in the UK. I just need to wait until I find either the budget to get it or until they decide to send me them. But this is the last ever bottle of Mash Gang's first ever brew. It says sample not for rebrew, like it's got the wax seal on it. And they gave me this after the acquisition, just for being a pal and talking about their beers
Nice.
consistently. So this is like pride and joy. I mean, it's probably like 20% now.
I was going to say, presumably that will stay with the lid on forevermore.
Yes, unless if I decide to relapse and it's a predetermined thing, I'll just do it with
That'll
this.
be the one. I love the way you can talk about it. It's very admirable.
I think you've got to, man. Like, I saw a very dark time, and I'll never take away from people that are going through that and make light of their situation. But for me now, it's just like, oh, what was I like? You've got to, haven't you? Like, if ever anyone wants to talk to me, like, seriously about it, these things that happened that are really bad, weren't they? And the people that, were hurt by you just being a nightmare, that's bad, isn't it? Like, yeah. And I do still wake up in the middle of the night sometimes sweating because I've had a drinking dream. And sometimes I'll have a headache that feels a little bit like a hangover. And I'll think about all the horrible things that happened and all of the shame and all of this. And it kills me. But what can you do? You can't change the past. I'd love to, but you've just got to keep on going, haven't you?
It is fascinating how, a really quite deep and troubling story and past has pushed you in a direction through which you're now having a lot of fun, not harming anybody. You have released episodes of your own podcasts. I said before, you'd been on local radio. You've released your own song. All sorts has been going on that would never have happened if it wasn't for your journey into alcohol-free beer.
Like, I don't hate talking about myself, but I hate being like, oh, and I did this and I did this. But so I always mention first, I think this is ridiculous, all of this. Like, I'm just a guy who's like, I was an alcoholic, now I drink beer, and I'm on the internet shouting about that. But like, I think I was the first person in active recovery, or at least openly in active recovery, to win a British Guild of Beer Writers Award. I got invited to Parliament yesterday.
Yes, I've got to ask you about this.
And it's just like, what? Like, at one point I was walking through Westminster on my way into like dining room terrace A, and the little inner voice in my brain just went, this is mad. This is just so stupid.
What were you doing there? What was the reason for your visit?
So I was there with Alcohol Change UK, who are very much, I think, the best charity in the UK addressing alcohol harm and damage. I do have an issue with Drink Aware. I think that they put a lot of emphasis on, this is on you, the person. We're not going to do anything because we're owned by Big Alcohol, but you need to be aware. You're an alcoholic, be aware of that.
Yeah.
But we won't go into that because we're talking about Alcohol Change UK. So Alcohol Change UK, they're not anti-alcohol at all. They're anti-alcohol harm. So it's not like a preachy, thou shalt not drink. It's if alcohol is damaging you negatively, this is what we can do. We were there talking to drinks experts. So we had Liars, Spirits there. We had Dashwater, we had some kombucha and Lucky Saint, some like ministers, etc. from government, just talking about what policies could be put in place and what we could do to combat the effects of alcohol, because since COVID, unfortunately, it is a growing issue, especially with home drinkers. Yeah, I had to pinch myself quite a few times.
So do you sort of see yourself doing more of that sort of stuff?
I would love to do as much as possible. If I didn't have to pay a mortgage, I would commit my whole life to this. One, because I love beer. So there's that side of things, right? Getting to just talk about beer and hang out with breweries. It's like, what? I didn't train to do any of this. I'm very lucky. But then on the other side, there's been people reach out who I've known personally and people that have just found me on the internet that are like, you've really helped me, or this has really helped, or I was really struggling and you've got no idea how much joy and inspiration this has brought me. A few people, but it's not like, thousands at all. But even if one person is positively affected by what I'm doing, it's the most humbling thing. But it's also like, it's the whole reason to do it, isn't it, really?
Now, we get a lot of breweries listening to this podcast. If there's breweries listening now that don't have a low alcohol beer in their repertoire, what would you say to them?
Cowards. No, just take your time. It's going to happen, isn't it? I think we all know that it's going to happen for you at some point. I think we are moving past people being really stubbornly against it for it existing, if that makes sense. Like, people don't want to deny that good alcohol-free beer exists anymore. It's more just, we could do one, but it's going to cost a load of money, or it's going to be subpar and not up to our standard as a brewery. And I completely get that.
You say that, but essentially that is now also what every beer that a brewery has to be putting out has to go through the same thing. So just because of the alcohol content, I don't know that it should be given the same tag, because, if Dave and I have, or plenty of people, if you have a beer from a brewery and you go, this isn't up to their usual standard, we'll go, okay, that was no good. Won't go back to them for a while. We'll go try some other breweries. So I agree with you. You take your time, but at the same time, I think it should just be approached almost as, okay, this beer has no alcohol in it, but we're just going to hold it to the same standard as we would to a beer with alcohol that carries our name.
I think it's more with like a first time brew, it's the risk of it like failing in the tank and things like that, and like pasteurization, etc., and all of the calamities that I've known to happen, like cans exploding. Like, in fact, this brewery, I'm sure they won't mind me saying, but Barsham Brewery, who've just released their first alcohol-free beer, they sent me a video of their head brewer, like, where one of the tanks was just spewing out like hoppy, liquidy horribleness that failed in the tank. I've known yeast get really carried away and it keeps on fermenting. But also, there are so many really good brewers, particularly at the moment, Sam from We Could Be Friends, the Beak collab you're drinking. But collaboration is king. Every alcohol-free brewer just wants to collab with a really good brewery. Yeah. And once you've cracked that, then
yeah, that's a good point, actually. If you're a brewery who's never ventured into it, just get hold of somebody from one of the specialist breweries who have.
It's the same principle, isn't it? When a brewery goes to do a sour or something for the first time, hasn't done a sour, what do? You go find the person who knows what they're talking about, right?
Yeah, for sure. And I'm never going to claim to be like an expert in how to make a beer, else I'd have definitely done it by now. It's more from brewers that I've had conversations with about alcohol-free brewing. It's like, right, you've got people that have just trained to brew alcohol-free and never trained to brew full alcohol. It's like a totally different process.
Yeah.
And like, they'll do things with the kit that, conventional brewers would go, what are you doing? Like that? No, you can't do that. And it's like, no, because look what happens. It's like, oh, I think it is the future of the industry. And, we're never going to lose alcohol, and nor should we. A world without alcohol is a depressing, miserable world. I don't ever want to see that. I want to see more absolutely banging 8% dippers and 11% nitro stouts in the world. I want to see loads of that, but I want to see really good alcohol-free beer alongside it, because more people, whether people like it or not, more people are being mindful with how they drink.
We've talked about a few beers, and I can tell quite happily, and you would talk to us about alcohol-free beers for hours and hours and hours. But given that we are just towards, when this episode releases, it will be towards the end of January, but that's obviously doesn't mean that these beers are going to go away. You mentioned Barsham, which I know of as a very traditional brewery.
Indeed.
So to hear them doing an alcohol-free beer, which you raving about, is really interesting. Talk about that one by all means. But I was just going to say, if you wanted to give sort of our listeners some recommendations of who would you go for if you want to get some alcohol-free beers into your fridge moving forward, who would you go for?
There's different options. If you're doing supermarkets, you probably have already tried Guinness if you're thinking about alcohol-free beer. Probably tried Lucky Saint. They're your two. If you want a lager, it's Lucky Saint, and Guinness is Guinness. Recently, Proper Job releasing Morrison's. It's amazing. It's probably the best supermarket beer in terms of alcohol-free. It's just fantastic. It's a beer that I didn't think would ever exist. So definitely, if you're in the supermarket game, get that. Everyone that has tried it, that I've recommended it to, has said that it's really good. In terms of craft, I think Mash Gang you've just got to try Mash Gang beers. There's only ever going to be a few real winners out of alcohol-free beer in terms of a business like exploding to the heights of, let's say, Brewdog. Let's say in terms of a company that big, I think Mash Gang are going to be amongst that crowd. With Mash Gang kind of stepping up to that level, We Can Be Friends are a brewery that I think every beer that they've put out, they've done a few collabs and they've done some original beers. They're really, really good. Where else can we go? Barsham's beer was really good. I was really impressed by that. Only With Love are a fantastic brewery. Attic do a very good beer in Birmingham. Birmingham Brew Co. do possibly my favourite stout that exists.
Got to say, I had that stout recently. Now, I've had it before in the past, and I had it again recently, and it seems to me to have improved a lot.
Okay. I haven't tried it recently, so I'll have to...
I was really impressed with it.
The tap room's very close to me, so I do need to give it a visit. See, this is the issue with... Like, I drink it once, and then I don't get to try it again until someone buys me one, or I just...
They got 2 or 3 alcohol-free options, actually, I think, Birmingham Brew Co.
Yep, so they've got the Sober Brummy Pale and Sober Brummy Stout at the moment, but then you've got Attic that are just over the road that have got the Lucid. And also then we go on to, so like European beers, there's a company called ONP5, or Under 0.5. They're based in the Netherlands, but they ship to the UK. World beers, European beers, it's a whole other world. I've had Trappist beers, I've had smoked beers, every style of beer that you can imagine. Like, I had alcohol-free Delirium. And it's like, why and how? But cool. Like, just to be able to drink from the bottle. Back to rituals, you know, it feels really nice to have that bottle. Nearly ruined my life.
Yeah.
But it's like, oh, this feels fancy. So yeah, ONP5, and Raoul is a fantastic human being as well.
I feel as though we've learned so much, Dave.
Yeah, it is fascinating.
Do you know about the banana? What's the ABV of a ripe banana? 0.5. But you know, a lot of people will look at 0.5 and say, "Oh, it's still got alcohol in it. Can't have it." It's like, no. Like, orange juice can be 1%. Bread can be 1%, which I'm sure, you know, loads of people.
I was going to say, people making banana bread with ripe bananas are essentially making.
Yeah, you need to watch yourself. But yeah, that's like, it's one of those, like, amongst the alcohol-free community, and I'm sure the wider beer world, like the banana thing is, everyone knows it, or a lot of people know it, but I still get so many people that are like, 0.5% is not alcohol-free. It's UK legislation. It's all complex and weird and convoluted, but yeah, ripe banana, 0.5%.
There's a tolerance anyway as well, isn't there, with alcohol percentages, 0.5% either way?
Yes.
Does that still exist with alcohol-free as well? I presume it must do.
Yeah, so it's up to, I think, 0.7 off the top of my head, but don't quote me on that because that might be wrong. But I know that in the UK, let's say a 0.5% beer has to be called low alcohol. If a German company brewed it in Germany and sold it in the UK, it could be called no alcohol, because the legislation's different over there.
Yeah.
That's one of the things that we're trying to address very slowly.
I'm sort of blown away by this conversation.
Yeah.
I've learned a lot, and you've been so articulate in telling us all about your story.
Well, I'm so pleased, because I do have, and this is me being vulnerable now, do get imposter syndrome sometimes around like beer, because I wasn't, raised in this world. I've kind of just blagged my way through it by drinking a lot of alcohol-free stuff.
Yeah.
So it's really nice to have been invited on, and it's really nice that I haven't been boring for the both of you.
No, I was going to say, I mean, obviously we talk about beers with alcohol in a lot of the time, and sometimes quite a lot of alcohol in those beers. And the people who tune into us tune in for that. But I think everybody listening will have really just enjoyed what they've heard as well.
Well, I really hope so. I really hope so. Because I think it's just about options, isn't it? I don't want anyone to be forced to drink alcohol-free beer. If you're driving somewhere and you still want a nice beer, I want you to be able to have that experience and it not be terrible. That's all I want in the world.
And if people want to follow you on social media, what platforms are you on and how can they find you?
So I'm on most of them, but Instagram is the one that I understand the most. I'm showing my age, so it's Sober Boozers Club, sober_boozers_club. But Sober Boozers Club will get me. I am on TikTok, but I'm useless on there. And I started YouTube recently, but I'm not very good at that either. It's all the same stuff anyway, So, but Instagram is where I will actually be able to talk to you because I check it.
Daftaboutcraft.